Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about the imminent collapse of the world population, if it exists, the world population, that is. Okay, I'll move on to ask you, hit that like button, hit the join button, and send us your super chats before our population runs out. And I'm here with a guy who there's only one of him, so protect him with your life, much like the world population. It's Mark Pellegrino. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rucka. How you doing?
Decent, other than the impending collapse. So what have you heard about this?
Can I ask you a personal question? Are you doing your best to populate the earth?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm out there spreading my seed and hitting the road like a rolling stone. No, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Well, we're going to get into the types of people who are worried about this, and then like the types of solutions that might address this problem if it exists. But is this a real problem, do you think? Or is this a phenomenon? Whether it's a problem or not, is this a thing?
It's certainly a known phenomenon in China, where they had a policy of only one child, and every woman who attempted to have more was forced to have an abortion. And now they are trying to encourage their population to expand. They have something like, I don't know what it is, 8 men to every 1 woman in China. For other cultural reasons, and now they've realized that they've gotten themselves into a fix. So it's certainly a problem there. I think this idea originally came from an article that I read in the Epoch Times. You could take it with a grain of salt. The Epoch Times is a very interesting conservative newspaper that sort of touts typical conservative lines in the editorial pages, but I think has fairly decent news section. And their claim is something like this, and I could be spreading a little bit thin on the details, but the claim is that for several decades, the civilized world, the first world, the industrialized world, God bless you. I should have said Dad bless you. It's more appropriate for me. The industrialized world has dipped below the 2.1 children per family average for many decades. And if we continue to do this, we're going to experience a population contraction, the likes of which could cause failures across the entire economic sphere, because we simply won't have the people to occupy the jobs and positions that we have today that we require for our lives. Now, of course, the other side, the left, has been telling us for decades now that we're overpopulated, and that this overpopulation, of course, risks the complete depletion of resources, which will cause a huge die-off. So, I mean, I guess the question is, which side is right? And which side should we listen to? Should we listen to any side?
Right. I mean, there's just so much wrong with so much of these things that I'm hearing that it's like it would take longer to name all the things wrong with it than maybe life permits. Okay, so the claim, for the old claim, or the more prevalent claim in decades past, was, the world is overpopulated. We're running out of food by the year 2020 or whatever they said back then. And they didn't factor in technology, the potential if capitalism were actually allowed to be. Imagine how much food could be produced, or replacements for food. I mean, who the hell knows what people can do if they're free. But the same people saying, it's the job of Western countries to send food to Africa, right? Because God forbid Africans be liberated to grow and sell and trade food. No, we need to send them food, but food is going to run out too. So we need to, I don't know, not be. I guess there's too many of them to feed. It makes no sense. It requires suspension of what you know about life to buy into this alarmism. So on the other side now, we've got these conservatives saying, well, there's not enough people to fill the jobs. And aren't these jobs there in the first place because somebody's producing something that somebody wants? So if there were just fewer people in the market, wouldn't then there just be fewer goods to sell them, and then fewer jobs that need to be filled? But also, it's like they're also not controlling for capitalism, for technology. I mean, just look at the fact that what used to require like books, like a bookstore, right? There's the space for it. There's the production and shipping of books. There's all of that, the person to work at the desk. And now basically in your phone or on your tablet, you can access every book that's ever been written for $7 a month or something like that. So it's like, they're not controlling for the facts. They're treating everything like it's stagnant, like everything's fixed, everything's basically zero sum. And basically what it all boils down to, spoiler alert, is you need to renounce the life that you want. You need to renounce your own selfish personal goals and think more about the greater good. So, you don't want kids? Too bad. Time to have some kids. And what do you say in card games and poker? Like, I will match you. I will
call you. I'll call you.
I'll call you. I'll raise you. Let immigrants in. Oh, what's up now? They don't want those jobs filled that bad, do they? They don't want the immigrants coming. But it sounds like you were saying the world population altogether now is at 2.1 per
or under in the civilized world, which makes sense because children are not, economic values to people in the first world, right? They're personal values. They're things that take up resources. They don't produce resources, like they do in the third world. You have as many children as you possibly can because they're your lifeline. You're trying to subsist. And in the first world, you have lots of things you'd like to do first and then focus on a family after you acquire some of those things. So it makes sense that birth rates would go down in the richer parts of the world. But you're right, they have a framework, they have an orientation towards human beings that is something like, we are not that different from other animals. They forget that we have the capacity to adapt and master almost any situation that comes our way. And they forget that part of the great progress of the last 200 years has been the invention of labor-saving devices. The creative destruction of capitalism has made it possible for fewer people to do more things and to be more productive, to free up time for what really makes the world turn, which is thinking and creativity. And so they don't even think about the fact that less people doesn't matter so much because lots of things will be automated and lots of your time will be more free, provided we let people be free enough to invent these things that will increase our production to the level that we don't have to do the things that we do today. It may be inconceivable to us today, but it's quite possible if we let people be free.
And freedom would address so many of these issues that, so let's say in China, they've got a disproportionate amount of men because, 40 years ago, they only allowed people to have one child and most people opted to have a male child. And now there's more men than women. But if China were a free capitalist country, and if most of the rest of the world or all the rest of the world were predominantly laissez-faire capitalist, open travel between all these places, liberty, prosperity, I mean, think of all the single women around the world who might want to meet a Chinese man and vice versa. Everyone's traveling. The Chinese wouldn't have this irrational tribalism, this, worship of China and being Chinese and closing off the possibility of a foreigner. And, and similarly in the rest of the world, people would not feel so shut out from China. Anyway, like so many of these things I think would be addressed by liberty, capitalism, and reason, people actually being rationally selfish and, and letting themselves pursue happiness.
Of course, and we can look at this from a few different angles too. At the time that that I think Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb and started forecasting the doom and gloom, the end of the world in the next 30 or 40 years because of overpopulation, you could fit the entire population of the world into the state of Texas quite comfortably. Now, that gives you perspective. I think nowadays the population has grown to the extent that you can fit the entire population of the world into something like 4 states in the United States of America. And if you're traveling through, and if anybody travels, and I'm sure our audience there's a number in our audience that are traveled, what do you see most of the time when you're traveling? Lots of empty space. So look, the reason, if you want to talk about it from the left perspective that fears huge population, there's a reason we have a large population, and there's a reason we had such a small population for tens of thousands of years. The reason is because freedom enabled us to have the technology, as you said, to support larger and larger groups of people comfortably. Far from exhausting resources, capitalism actually extends resources and expands resources. Something politicians don't understand, something people on the left don't understand. I don't think people on the right understand it either. And the people on the right don't understand that less population isn't a fear either. Not only because less resources will be being used, but because technology will enable us to do more with less anyway.
Absolutely right. And I mean, in one of Ayn Rand's essays, she points out, via irrigation, you could bring water to the middle of nowhere in the US and build a new city anywhere in the land. Of course, the government, I think, either owns or controls most of America today. And that's in, the relatively free United States. Think about how many opportunities are stifled in the rest of the world. So there's a lot more people in the world today, obviously, than in centuries past. But it sounds like per family, there's much fewer smaller families. And like you pointed out, in the third world, they have more kids, just like in America, in places like in the Western civilization, when we were poorer before the Industrial Revolution, each family would have a bunch of kids. First of all, most of them would be unlikely to survive past birth or past a young age. So they, it's like, it's a numbers game in that respect. Also, they need them to work on the farm. And also, without technology, without reason, without the age of reason, teaching people about making plans and using technology, people probably didn't really know much about family planning. And today we have the possibility, unless Republicans have too much power, people are able to plan their families and decide when's the right time to have kids. So of course we see kind of more of the kind of compact hybrid style family, where there are fewer kids than we would have seen per family in the past.
Because people are having them not as a matter of economic interest. They're having them to expand their happiness, to be a component in the celebration of their lives. And that's exactly the way it should be. There's no optimum population. There's no even a population of 12 billion, 13 billion, something that would make a leftist crap his pants, is nothing to worry about. It's absolutely nothing to worry about, provided people are left free and empowered, as Alex Epstein would say, and able to pursue their happiness as their moral goal. It doesn't matter how big or small our population gets. It's nothing to fear.
But if you make this argument towards a lot of people, they say, well, liberty sounds nice, but first of all, it chips away at your soul. A culture becomes decadent, and then they're not happy, and also it brings about all types of problems. So we need like a central purpose as a nation, or as a state. Like that's kind of their answer. So when you address their economic concerns, they say, well, but quote, libertarianism is just a nice idea, but in practice, we need religion or nationalism, they would say. A lot of the people who lament the economic problems that low population brings about.
I don't think libertarianism represents a liberty movement,
right?
Because to me, it disconnects liberty from the prime end of liberty, which is the rational pursuit of value. It just says liberty for its own sake, and I don't think that's what liberty is. And so, it's clearly a culture needs to be re-educated as they've been re-educated over the last 120 years to embrace collectivism. They have to be re-educated to embrace individualism and exactly what that means, and how does liberty relate to individualism. These are definitely important things that I think we as objectivists are attempting to do. Right, we're attempting to not just counter the crazy messages, the tribalistic collectivist messages of the left and right, but we're actually trying to offer a positive alternative.
Yeah, the world needs an ethical revolution and just an overall philosophical change. So I don't use the word libertarianism. I was using it like that's what conservatives answer when you make arguments for liberty. They say, yeah, okay, libertarianism sounds nice, they say, and then they tell you why it wouldn't work.
It's true, yeah. But does libertarianism sound nice? It doesn't to me. I just read Liberty Solutions by a rabid libertarian, and some of the situations that he poses as utopian ideals are utterly ridiculous.
Like what? Does any
beyond comprehension? For example, if rights are inviolable, so that's what they do is they decontextualize every moral social principle, and they just hinge it to liberty, or they take it as an absolute, but disconnected from the context of human life. So if somebody committed a murder and they were found guilty, it would be a violation of that person's rights for a police officer or representative of the state to remand this person to custody, or to even have them face trial. They could never force them to face trial. They couldn't force them to go to jail. None of that, because that would be a violation of the individual's rights, even though he did, of course, committed the most heinous act of rights violation that one can imagine. Now, the community itself could choose to ostracize this person and, or worse, lynch the person or do something, torturous to the person in payment for what it did. But the state would not have any accountability to that. That would, the moral culpability for doing something like that to the individual would be on the people who would be violating the rights of the murderer. Now, that's just one thing. Another thing, a parent could decide at any time not to stop feeding its child. Now, they can't beat them, they can't hit them, they can't throw them against the wall or kill them in a way that uses violence, but provided they don't use violence, as if withholding food is not an act of violence, then that's completely legitimate form of parenting. Parenting is not a contract, is not a moral obligation that binds you for life, or at least to the age of majority, to your child. It's a bind that you can break at any time,
according to them, according to
this particular libertarian who represents tons of libertarians, like the David Kokeshes of the world. You talk to David Kokesh, he's out of his fucking mind.
Right. So, people say like, oh, you objectivists, why won't you be friendlier to other, to allies, people like who are libertarian or whatever, conservative? Why do you push everybody away? And it's like, well, without a philosophical leg to stand on, look where these people end up. They end up with a view that says you shouldn't have a court case. You shouldn't be arrested for killing somebody. You should be able to starve your child because no force was used. I mean, and, a lot of these people, they become statists like that. They become statists overnight because to them, they're so primarily motivated by negativity that a lot of these same people, they see the left as like the primary thing to be concerned with. It's the bane of their existence. So anything that hurts the left, populism, it's good. It's good for us, right? Trump, populism, anti-abortion measures, whatever it is. If it's anti-left, then it's good in their eyes. And then they end up all over the place politically. So then what kind of allies are they to objectivists then?
And you see this kind of political pragmatism being preached in the news today with Saudi Arabia, China, Russia. We have these unsavory alliances with Saudi Arabia because we have to worry about Iran. And the right excuses this. They say, well, we've been doing this for decades. Of course, it's an unsavory administration, but you have to do what you have to do. Geopolitics knows no ethics. That is the stupidest fucking thing in the world to say. Politics, if anything, is good politics, proper politics, grounded upon ethics. You do not have relationships with these people. You shun them deliberately. You don't give them the moral sanction of your support because they happen to be the enemy of your enemy. You shun them with all of your stuff. You try to convince other nations who are somewhat like-minded to you to shun them as well. And we get this as objectivists, this idea is, why don't you just ally with the Republicans? They seem more in line with a lot of the things you think, because that's a moral compromise. And you can't, who can trust a moral compromiser? Nobody.
Right. And the battle,
no integrity.
The battle is philosophical ultimately, and that's what we're trying to change. So it's not about like who are you going to vote for in November. It's about what are you pushing for. And Republicans, they've been working overtime for the last few years to push us away, people who believe in capitalism, explicitly so, I would say. And much like capitalism would solve a lot of these domestic issues, solve this alleged, job shortage or labor shortage or whatever it is. So too, a proper foreign policy would address all these problems where enemies of liberty, enemies of a free country would get the idea real quick that shenanigans will not be tolerated, as I like to say it. Very quickly, the world would become a safer place for all. But anyway, should we read a few super chats, you think? We got
if we have them.
Marilyn says, we need immigration. And she says, even more, we need freedom. Yeah. Some would say those two go together. Jonathan with 9.99, thank you. Marilyn says, philosopher kings really hate the idea that individuals know best. Also, the good requires choice. Yep. Allie says, I would say the Bible Belt South is more for control of women, not on an economic level. Religion wants to control the population for that one reason. Free trade with 55 of the Swedish currency says, a diesel-powered combine harvester enables a single worker to harvest 100 tons of wheat per hour. Resources are created by the individual human mind. Right. If the mind is free to produce and to devise machines, etc., and to delegate labor and to delegate, then then miracles do exist. Miracles do happen. Roland with 199 euro says, here's some diaper money. Now get to work, guys. Well, thank you. Okay, so back to the population collapse. Basically, they're saying, what are some of the solutions to this problem that people are proposing? Have more kids? Is that basically it?
I guess that was part of it, but ironically, they thought it would cause the right to loosen up a little bit on their immigration phobias now, which I think would be a positive move on their part. But still, their predictions of the future represent a static population that can't adjust or move and doesn't progress at all. The only way some sort of apocalyptic scenario can come true with underpopulation or overpopulation is if the statists and the collectivists are allowed to continue the monetary policy and energy policies that they're pushing now. We are definitely heading towards some major cliff. The anti-human policies that the left is promoting and the right is allowing will be the end of us for sure.
Yeah. First, the enemies of the market, enemies of capitalism. They've been tampering with people's liberty, tampering with market forces, tampering with property rights for a long, long time. This brings about various problems. And then all the, conservatives ever needed to do was just point out that these problems were brought about by the regulators, by the taxers, by the spenders in the government, by the people who did not allow the free market to be. But instead, conservatives have, they've seldom done that. They've seldom pointed out that that enemies of capitalism brought this about. But they blamed corporations. They blame elements of the free market, and they basically have pushed for bailouts. They've pushed for more regulations, and then when it comes to global trade in recent years, especially, they're hostile to imports, and they are themselves violating people's property rights, violating market forces, tampering with market activity, to I guess not subsidize, incentivize domestic production, even when reality does not incentivize that. So it's a very lonely position to be pro-liberty, pro-capitalism, pro-individualism. And the only way we're going to make more friends, I guess, is if we inspire people on an individual level to want a better life for themselves, individually, to want what life has to offer.
Yeah, and for people to understand that every time the government or a politician, representative of the government, says they want to do something for you, what they're actually doing is stealing a piece of your moral agency. They're taking a piece of your capacity to act on your own behalf. Don't let them do it.
Don't let them do it. All right. Anything else on this topic that you read about that we didn't address? Or
I do say all of this stuff about the population as a stepdad.
Yeah, as a stepdad. So, God, that's classic. All right. So, yeah, I guess as a stepdad, you have a unique perspective on population and all of that. So
it's like I do on so many other things as a stepdad.
Exactly. So no wonder you're pro-abortion.
Yeah.
All right. Well, coming up today at 9 p.m. UK time, it's HBTV with Harry Binswanger on objectivism versus academic philosophy. That to me sounds like the battle.
One.
That's a good one. That's the battle, I would think. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for being members of the channel. Hit the join button if you haven't become members, or you can become members on the website link down below. And if you're watching this after we're live, leave us a super thanks to thank this network for all of the content that it's providing. Thanks, Mark, and get out there and have some kids, huh?
Yes, indeed. I'll try.
All right. Thank you, and goodbye.